The pen felt heavier than a block of granite. Liam stared at the final page of the divorce settlement, the crisp white paper, a blank testament to the end of a decade. His lawyer, a man with tired eyes and a suit that had seen better days, gave a gentle, almost apologetic cough. Across the polished mahogany table, Clara sat perfectly poised, her expression as unreadable and as flawless as the single, perfect pearl at her throat. Beside her, her own lawyer, a shark in a tailored suit, radiated an aura of smug victory. Clara had taken everything. It was not an exaggeration. It was a clinical fact listed in the dense paragraphs of legalese before him. The house, the beautiful, sprawling colonial, he had not just paid for, but had personally redesigned, pouring his architect's soul into every beam and window, was hers. The joint savings, the investment portfolio, the art collection they had curated together, hers. Even the dog, a golden retriever named Atlas, that he had raised from a clumsy, oversized puppy, was listed under her assets. He was left with his car, his personal effects, and a small portion of his own business account, just enough to prevent the settlement from being legally contested as punitive. It was a masterclass in social and financial annihilation, executed with surgical precision. "Liam," Clara said, her voice smooth and cool, a stone skipping across a frozen lake. "There's no need to draw this out. We both know this is for the best." He looked up from the paper, his gaze meeting hers. He saw no remorse, no sadness, not even a flicker of the woman he had once loved. He saw only a serene, unshakable confidence. The confidence of someone who had always gotten what she wanted and who had just secured her greatest acquisition. She believed she was upgrading, shedding the dead weight of a husband who, in her eyes, in the eyes of her wealthy parents, had never quite measured up. He was a boutique architect with a respectable but modest firm. She was destined for a world of galas, boardrooms, and the kind of wealth that made his income look like a rounding error. She was already seeing Richard Vance, a real estate developer whose ambition was as vast and shiny as the glass towers he erected. Liam picked up the pen. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of city traffic. He could feel the weight of their expectations, his lawyer's sympathetic anxiety, the opposing lawyer's impatient greed, and Clara's cool, detached finality. They all saw a defeated man, a man stripped of his life, his home, his future. They saw a failure. They had no idea what he was holding in reserve. They saw the humble architect, not the silent strategist. They saw the man who had lost his house, not the man who was about to build an empire. He signed his name. The ink was black and final. He pushed the document across the table. Clara's lawyer snatched it up, scanning the signature with a triumphant glint in his eye before placing it neatly into a leather briefcase. It was done. Clara stood, smoothing the front of her designer dress. "I'll have your remaining things sent to wherever you'll be staying. Just have your lawyer forward the address." The dismissal was as effortless as breathing for her. Liam rose to his feet. He was taller than her lawyer, a fact that seemed to momentarily surprise the man. Liam's movements were not those of a broken man. They were calm, deliberate. He adjusted his cuffs, his gaze steady. "That won't be necessary, Clara," he said, his voice even. "I've already moved my things." He turned and walked out of the room without a backward glance, leaving a wake of faint confusion behind him. In that sterile, silent conference room, they thought they had witnessed an ending. They were wrong. It was a beginning. Within 2 years, Clara would understand the catastrophic scale of her miscalculation. She would sit in the ruins of the life she had so carefully constructed, her phone in her hand, dialing his number for the 63rd time. Each unanswered call a screaming testament to the man she had so thoroughly, so completely underestimated. And for everyone watching this, I just want to say thank you for being here. If you enjoy stories about resilience and vindication, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps more than you know. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now, let's get back to how it all began. The humiliation had been a slow-acting poison administered in small, polite doses over years. It had become most potent at the Hamiltons' dinner parties. Clara's parents, Eleanor and Marcus Hamilton, presided over these events from their palatial home, a monument to old money and rigid social hierarchies. Liam, with his calloused hands from model building and his quiet, observant nature, was a perennial disappointment to them. He was a novelty Clara had brought home, one they assumed she would eventually tire of, like a fashionable but impractical handbag. One evening, about a year before the divorce, stood out in his memory with painful clarity. The dining room was aglow with the light of a crystal chandelier, the air thick with the scent of roasted duck and expensive perfume. The conversation, as always, revolved around money, influence, and the recent acquisitions of those present. Marcus Hamilton, a man whose smile never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes, turned his attention to Liam. "Liam," he began, his voice carrying across the table, silencing the other conversations. "Clara tells us your little firm landed a commission for a library renovation. Quaint." The word quaint was delivered with the precision of a dart. It was meant to diminish, to frame his work as a charming but insignificant hobby. Liam felt Clara's hand on his arm, a gentle pressure that wasn't for comfort, but for control. A warning to play along, to be the good, unassuming husband. "It's a challenging project, Marcus," Liam replied, his tone measured. "The building has historical significance. We're working to preserve its character while modernizing the space. It's rewarding work." Richard Vance, already a fixture at Clara's side even then, let out a soft, condescending chuckle. He was everything the Hamiltons admired, brash, wealthy, and utterly convinced of his own superiority. "Rewarding, I'm sure," Richard said, swirling the red wine in his glass. "But is it profitable? I'm about to break ground on the Vantage Tower. We're talking a 70-story mixed-use monolith. That, my friend, is rewarding." He winked at Clara, who gave him a small, conspiratorial smile. Liam saw the exchange. He saw the easy alliance between them, built on a shared language of assets and ambition he was not privy to. He felt like a foreigner in his own life. "Some things have value beyond their price tag," Liam said quietly, not as a challenge, but as a simple statement of his own philosophy. Eleanor Hamilton sighed, a delicate, theatrical sound. "Oh, Liam, that's a lovely sentiment for an artist. But this is the real world. You have to provide for my daughter. A man's worth is in what he builds, what he provides." Her eyes swept over his modest suit, the implication clear. What he provided was not enough. The rest of the dinner was a blur of similar passive-aggressive attacks. They spoke of his car, his choice of vacation spots, his lack of interest in golf or yachting, all presented as evidence of his fundamental lack of drive. He sat through it all, a placid expression on his face, while inside a quiet, cold anger began to crystallize. He wasn't angry at their judgment of him. He was angry at their shallow, brittle definition of worth. And he was deeply, profoundly hurt by Clara's complicity. She never defended him. She would simply squeeze his hand, her perfectly manicured nails digging slightly into his skin, a silent command to endure it, to absorb the insults for the sake of her social standing. Later that night, as they drove home in a tense silence, Clara finally spoke. "You could have tried a little harder, Liam." "Tried harder at what? Pretending to be someone I'm not?" "At fitting in. At showing them you have ambition. When Richard talks about his tower, his eyes light up. When you talk about your library, you sound like you're curating a museum exhibit." "Because I care about the work itself, Clara, not just the price tag. I thought you understood that. It's what you said you loved about me." She turned to look out the window, at the blur of city lights. "People change, Liam. They grow. Or at least, they're supposed to. That was the moment he knew his marriage was over. It wouldn't end for another year, but the foundation had crumbled. She didn't want a partner. She wanted an accessory that matched her aspirations. He had spent years trying to build a bridge between his world of quiet integrity and her world of loud ambition. But he now realized she had been dismantling it from her side all along. The day she asked for the divorce, she laid it all out with the same chilling pragmatism her father used in business deals. "This isn't working, Liam. I need more. I deserve more. Richard can give me the life I want." There was no argument. There was no point. He had been a placeholder, a stepping stone. And now she was stepping off. As he packed his few boxes from the house he had built, he made sure to take one thing that was truly his: a heavy cardboard tube containing the rolled-up schematics of a project he had been sketching in secret for years. It was a building so audacious, so elegant, so far beyond anything he had ever attempted, that he had never shown it to anyone. It was his dream, his answer to their world of glass and steel monoliths. He called it the Elysian Spire. As he walked out the door for the last time, leaving behind the life he knew, he clutched that tube like a lifeline. It was all he had left, or so it seemed. The 2 months following the divorce were a study in gray. Liam moved into a small, sparsely furnished apartment in a part of the city that was still aspiring to be fashionable. The walls were thin, the view was of a brick wall, and the constant sound of sirens was the city's melancholy lullaby. He sold his firm, a painful decision that felt like cutting off a limb. The partners were good men, but the firm was too tied to his old life, his old identity. He needed a clean break, a complete reset. The money from the sale was enough to live on for a year or two, if he was frugal. He spent his days in a state of suspended animation. He would wake up, drink coffee while staring at the brick wall, and then unroll the plans for the Elysian Spire on his small dining table. The design was more than just a building. It was a philosophy made manifest. A slender, twisting tower that seemed to reach for the sky, not with arrogance, but with grace. It incorporated green spaces on every 10th floor, a revolutionary water reclamation system, and a facade of photosensitive glass that would shift in color with the changing light of the day. It was beautiful, sustainable, and according to every conventional developer, completely unbuildable. An architect's fantasy. For Liam, it was a reason to get out of bed in the morning. He refined the designs, ran structural simulations on his laptop, and sourced theoretical materials. He worked with a singular, monastic focus, shutting out the world. He ignored calls from mutual friends who offered pitying condolences. He deleted his social media, unwilling to see the curated perfection of Clara and Richard's new life together. He was a ghost in his own city. One rainy Tuesday, as he was wrestling with a complex detail of the spire's foundation, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Liam Sterling?" a gravelly voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Alistair Finch. We met briefly a few years ago at the Architectural Guild Awards. You won for that little community theater you designed. I was the old man who told you your use of reclaimed wood was either genius or madness." Liam remembered him. Alistair Finch was a legend in the development world, but a different kind. He wasn't a builder of shiny, soulless towers like Richard Vance. Finch created communities. He was an old-school visionary who had been quietly buying up neglected parcels of land for decades, waiting for the right projects. He was notoriously reclusive and selective. "Mr. Finch, of course I remember. It's an honor." "Cut the formalities, son. I heard what happened. Your wife, the split, selling your firm. Tough break." Liam's jaw tightened. "I'm managing." "I'm sure you are," Finch said, a note of amusement in his voice. "I also heard you were the sharpest designer in this city, and now you're a free agent. I've been following your work for years, Sterling. You have a poet's soul and an engineer's mind. It's a rare combination." Liam was stunned into silence. "Here's the thing," Finch continued. "I own a piece of land, a forgotten, derelict plot down by the old wharf district. Everyone thinks it's worthless. Vance tried to buy it from me a dozen times, wants to throw up another one of his glass boxes. But I see something different for that space. I've been waiting for the right vision, the right architect. I have a feeling you might be the man with that vision. Why don't you come and show me what you're working on? Bring that project you've been hiding from the world." Liam's heart hammered against his ribs. How could Finch possibly know? "How did you?" Finch chuckled. "I have my sources. People talk. They say you were working on something special, something personal. I want to see it. My office. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. Don't be late." The line went dead. Liam stared at his phone, then at the sprawling schematics covering his table. The Elysian Spire. An impossible dream. For the first time in months, the gray fog in his mind began to part, and a sliver of sunlight broke through. He had spent his entire marriage being told his vision was too small. Now the biggest player in the city was asking to see it. He carefully, reverently, began to roll up the plans. It was time to see if his dream could be built on something more than paper. The next 2 years were a blur of intense, focused work. Liam's small apartment was quickly replaced by a temporary suite at a hotel, and then by a minimalist, light-filled penthouse overlooking the very wharf district he was about to transform. His partnership with Alistair Finch was not just a business arrangement, it was a mentorship. Finch had the capital, the connections, and the iron will to navigate the city's bureaucracy. Liam had the vision. They formed a new company, a lean and agile entity they named Phoenix Development. The name was Liam's suggestion. It was personal. He poured everything he had into the Elysian Spire project. The impossible design became possible with Finch's backing. They brought in the best structural engineers in the world, who were invigorated by the challenge. They pioneered new construction techniques and sourced sustainable materials that had never been used on this scale. The project was kept under a cloak of intense secrecy. Finch was a master at this. The land was secured through a series of shell corporations. The building permits were filed under a generic project name. To the outside world, something was happening on the old wharf, but no one knew what or who was behind it. The city's real estate blogs buzzed with rumors, but Finch and Liam remained silent. Liam transformed. The quiet, accommodating man from the Hamiltons' dinner parties was gone. In his place was a confident, authoritative leader. He commanded boardrooms with his quiet competence. He could dissect a complex engineering problem with unnerving speed and solve it with an elegant, innovative solution. He hired a small, fiercely loyal team, including a sharp young assistant named Sarah, who guarded his time with the ferocity of a hawk. He never spoke of Clara. He never looked back. His past was a different country, and he had no desire to revisit it. He knew through the city's grapevine that Clara had married Richard Vance in a lavish ceremony. He knew they were living in his old house. He knew Vance was consolidating his power, becoming ever more arrogant, ever more convinced of his dominance in the city skyline. Occasionally, Liam would allow himself a moment of reflection. He would stand at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, which was in a building adjacent to the construction site, and watch the spire rise. It was breathtaking. It didn't just scrape the sky, it seemed to dance with it. The twisting form was taking shape. The innovative green terraces were being framed, and the first panels of the light-sensitive glass were being installed. It was more beautiful than he had even imagined. One afternoon, Sarah entered his office with a tablet. "Mr. Sterling, the quarterly report from Vance Holdings just came out. You might want to see this." Liam took the tablet. Vance was leveraged to the hilt. He had taken out massive loans to finance his new flagship project, the Vantage Tower, the very building he had lorded over Liam at that fateful dinner party. The project was already over budget and behind schedule. To secure the financing, Vance had essentially gambled his entire company on its success. Its projected occupancy rates were sky high, based on the assumption that it would be the newest, most desirable commercial and residential space in the city for the next decade. "He's exposed," Liam said, his voice neutral. "Completely," Sarah confirmed. "His tower is a monument to ego. Ours," she nodded towards the window, "at the rising form of the Elysian spire, is a monument to vision. When we announce, the market will shift instantly. Every prime corporate and residential tenant he's counting on will have a better, more prestigious, and more innovative option." Liam handed the tablet back to her. He felt no glee, no sense of vengeful satisfaction. He felt only a profound, quiet certainty, a sense of cosmic rebalancing. Richard Vance had built his empire on arrogance and speculation. Liam was building his on solid ground, with vision and integrity. The laws of gravity, both physical and financial, were absolute. Richard was about to learn that what goes up, without a proper foundation, must come down. "The press conference is set for 2 weeks from today," Liam said. "Make sure everything is perfect." "It will be," Sarah promised. He turned back to the window. The sun was beginning to set, and the first few panels of glass on the spire caught the golden light, transforming it into a shimmering, iridescent jewel. It was a beacon of his new life, a life he had built not from the ashes of his old one, but from the dreams he had refused to let die. He was ready. Clara Vance, formerly Hamilton, formerly Sterling, stood in the center of her magnificent living room, adjusting a bouquet of lilies in a tall crystal vase. The room, which Liam had designed to be a warm, inviting space filled with natural light, was now decorated in Richard's preferred style: cold, contemporary, and ostentatiously expensive. It felt less like a home and more like the lobby of a luxury hotel. But it was impressive, and in Clara's world, that was all that mattered. She was hosting a small, exclusive party for some of the city's most influential figures. Richard was holding court by the massive fireplace, a glass of scotch in his hand, his voice booming as he described the final stages of the Vantage Tower. He was at the zenith of his power, and Clara was the perfect accessory at his side. She had everything she had ever wanted: the status, the wealth, the unambiguous envy of her peers. Her parents, Marcus and Eleanor, were here, beaming with pride. They had been right about Liam all along. He had simply faded away, a forgotten footnote in her much grander story. "The Vantage will redefine the skyline," Richard declared to a rapt audience. "It's not just a building, it's a statement. It says that this city is a global player, and Vance Holdings is leading the charge." Clara smiled, her public smile, practiced and perfect. She felt a deep, validating satisfaction. This was real power. This was substance, not some quaint library renovation. Later, as guests mingled, Marcus pulled her aside. "He's quite a man, your Richard," he said, his eyes gleaming. "He has the killer instinct, something your first husband sorely lacked." "Liam was a different person, Daddy," Clara said, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "He was a dreamer," Marcus scoffed. "And dreamers don't build empires. They end up in rented rooms. You made the right choice, my dear, the only choice." The conversation was interrupted by a guest, a banking executive named Peterson. "Richard, there's a lot of buzz about that mystery project down at the wharf, the one Finch is backing. Any idea what it is? My sources are being unusually tight-lipped." Richard waved a dismissive hand. "Alistair Finch is an old sentimentalist. He's probably building some kind of bird sanctuary or a public park. The man has no stomach for real profit. That land is a commercial graveyard. Whatever he's building, it's no threat to us. The Vantage Tower is the only game in town." This confident dismissal reassured everyone. Richard's word was gospel in these circles. The conversation moved on to other topics: summering in the Hamptons, the upcoming charity gala, the fluctuating stock market. Clara drifted through her party, a gracious and attentive hostess. Yet for a fleeting moment, as she looked around the room at the powerful, preening people, she felt a strange emptiness. It was a feeling she quickly suppressed. This was success. This was happiness. She had to believe it. She had sacrificed too much for it to be anything else. In the background, a large television screen mounted over the bar was tuned to the city's leading business news channel, the volume low. It was just background noise, a flickering part of the ambiance. No one was paying it any attention. No one noticed when the anchor, a woman with a serious expression, broke from the regular programming. "We have breaking news tonight in the world of real estate," the anchor began, her voice crisp and authoritative. "We are going live to a press conference for the official unveiling of what has been, until now, the most secretive and anticipated development in this city's history. The project on the Old Wharf District, backed by the legendary Alistair Finch." A few people in the room turned their heads towards the screen, their interest piqued. Richard, however, was still laughing at a joke, his back to the TV. For months, the identity of the visionary architect behind this transformative project has been a closely guarded secret, the anchor continued. Tonight, that secret is revealed. The image on the screen cut to a sleek, modern auditorium. A man was walking towards a podium. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit. He moved with an easy, understated confidence. The camera zoomed in on his face as he stepped into the light. Clara's wine glass slipped from her fingers. It shattered on the marble floor, the red wine spreading like a pool of blood. The sound was sharp, abrupt, and it caused the room to fall silent. Every eye turned first to her, and then to the television screen she was staring at with an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. It was Liam. The day of the announcement, Liam felt a profound sense of calm. He stood in the green room behind the stage, adjusting his tie in the mirror. He barely recognized the man looking back at him. The last 2 years had chiseled away the uncertainty, the quiet hurt, and replaced it with a resolute stillness. He was no longer the man who endured insults at dinner parties. He was the man who had moved a mountain, piece by piece, while no one was watching. Alistair Finch clapped him on the shoulder, his eyes twinkling. "Nervous, son?" "No," Liam said, and he was surprised to find it was the truth. "Just ready." "Good," Finch grunted. "Go out there and show them what a real vision looks like. Let Vance and his crowd of peacocks see what a man can build when he's not distracted by his own reflection." Sarah appeared at the door. "5 minutes, Mr. Sterling." She gave him a small, encouraging smile. "You've got this." Liam took a deep breath. He thought for a moment of Clara. He pictured her in their old house, the house he had poured his heart into. He imagined her life with Richard, a life of glittering surfaces and hollow cores. There was no anger left, only a distant, clinical sadness. She had made her choice based on a flawed prospectus, judging his worth on his current assets rather than his potential. It was a poor investment strategy, and the market was about to issue a severe correction. He walked out onto the stage to a blinding flash of cameras. The auditorium was packed with journalists, investors, city officials, and industry leaders. The air was electric with anticipation. He stepped up to the podium, and a hush fell over the room. Behind him, on a massive screen, an image appeared. It was a stunning, photorealistic rendering of the Elysian Spire, its elegant form twisting into the dawn sky, the green terraces lush with life, the glass facade capturing the first rays of sun. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Liam began to speak, his voice steady and clear, amplified by the microphone. "Good evening. My name is Liam Sterling." He paused, letting the name sink in. He knew that for many in the room, it would mean nothing. For a select few, it would be a bombshell. For generations, we have built our cities upwards, creating monuments of steel and glass that celebrate ambition. But too often, that ambition comes at the cost of connection, to nature, to community, and to ourselves. We've built walls that keep the world out. when we should be building structures that invited in. He clicked a remote, and the image on the screen changed to a detailed cross-section of the building, showing the integrated public spaces, the sustainable energy systems, the soaring atriums. The Elysian Spire is not just a building, it is a new philosophy for urban living. It is a vertical community designed for the future, a place where innovation meets nature, where luxury meets sustainability, and where commerce meets conscience. He spoke for 20 minutes, his words painting a picture not just of a building, but of a better way to live and work. He laid out the technical specifications, the financial backing, rock solid thanks to Finch, and the timeline. He announced that pre-leasing for the commercial and residential spaces would begin the next morning, and that several Fortune 500 companies had already signed letters of intent to become anchor tenants. These were the very companies Richard Vance had been courting for the Vantage Tower. He ended his presentation with a final, powerful image of the spire at night, lit from within, a beacon of elegance and innovation. "This is the future of our city's skyline," he said simply. "Thank you." The room exploded into applause. It was thunderous, a wave of genuine excitement and awe. Liam stepped back from the podium, his work done. He had not mentioned Richard Vance. He had not mentioned his past. He didn't need to. The building spoke for itself. It was his rebuttal, his closing argument, his final word, delivered not in anger, but in 70 stories of undeniable genius. In the cold, opulent living room of the house Liam had once called home, the silence was a physical thing. The party was over, though no one had officially left. The guests stood in stunned clusters, whispering amongst themselves, their eyes darting between the television screen and the frozen figures of their hosts. Richard Vance's face, usually ruddy with confidence, was a ghastly, pale white. He looked as if he'd been punched in the gut. He understood the implications immediately and completely. The anchor tenants, the premium pricing, the very prestige his entire financial model for the Vantage Tower was built on. It had all just evaporated. Liam Sterling hadn't just built a rival building, he had built a replacement. But it was Clara who was the epicenter of the shockwave. She stood motionless, a single drop of red wine from her fallen glass, staining the tip of her white designer shoe like a drop of blood. Her mind was a chaotic storm of disbelief and dawning horror. Liam, the quiet, unassuming man she had discarded, the dreamer her father had mocked. He was the mystery architect. He was the one backed by the untouchable Alistair Finch. The quaint projects, the lack of killer instinct, it had all been a colossal, catastrophic misreading of the man. He hadn't lacked ambition. He had simply possessed an ambition so vast, so patient, that she had been utterly blind to it. The news anchor's voice cut through her trance. Industry experts are already calling the Elysian Spire a game changer, with its revolutionary design and focus on sustainability. It is expected to immediately become the city's most prestigious address, likely drawing premier tenants away from older, less innovative developments, such as the nearly completed Vantage Tower. The direct mention of Richard's project was like a death sentence delivered on live television. Richard finally moved, stumbling towards the bar and fumbling to pour himself another scotch, his hands shaking so badly that the liquor sloshed over the rim of the glass. Clara's phone buzzed in her clutch. It was her father. She ignored it. It buzzed again. Her mother. She felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, their pity and morbid curiosity a suffocating blanket. The life she had so carefully constructed, the status she had traded her marriage for, was crumbling to dust before her very eyes. She had hitched her wagon to a star she thought was rising, only to discover it was a meteor, plummeting to Earth. And the man she had cast aside had quietly built his own galaxy. The first call to Liam's phone came at 10:17 p.m., just as he was stepping into the elevator at the event venue. He saw Clara flash on the screen. He looked at it for a moment, his expression unreadable, and then silenced the call, letting it go to voicemail. He would not give her the satisfaction of a reaction, not anger, not triumph, only silence. The guests at Clara's party began to make their excuses, murmuring awkward goodbyes as they fled a scene of social carnage. They didn't want to be associated with the Vances. In their world, failure was a contagious disease. Soon it was just Clara, a drunk and silent Richard, and her parents who had stayed behind. "What is the meaning of this?" Eleanor demanded, her voice shrill. "How could this happen?" "He played us," Marcus whispered, looking at the television where Liam was now being mobbed by reporters. "All those years he sat at our table, quiet as a mouse, and he was planning this. He played us all for fools." Clara didn't hear them. She was staring at her phone. She tried calling Liam again, straight to voicemail. Her fingers flew across the screen, typing a frantic text message. "Liam, we need to talk. Please, call me." No reply. She tried again. Voicemail. And again, voicemail. The dam of her composure finally broke. The perfect poised facade shattered, and raw, desperate panic flooded in. She had not only lost, she had been rendered irrelevant. She had traded a king for a pawn, and she hadn't even realized she was playing chess. Richard slammed his glass down. "I'm ruined," he slurred, his voice thick with self-pity. "He's ruined me." Clara barely registered his words. Her entire focus was on her phone, on the unanswered calls. She left her ruined party, her ruined husband, and her shocked parents, and walked out onto the cold stone patio that Liam had designed. The city skyline glittered before her, but it was no longer dominated by the half-finished skeleton of the vantage tower. Her eyes were searching for the wharf, for the spot where a new light was now shining, a beacon that mocked her, that illuminated the full, devastating extent of her mistake. She hit redial, and again, and again. Each unanswered ring was an indictment. Each shift to voicemail was a judgment. She lost count. 23, 38, 51. The calls became a compulsive, desperate act, a prayer to a God who was no longer listening. Liam arrived back at his penthouse. The city spread out beneath him, a tapestry of lights. In the distance, the skeletal frame of the Elysian spire was lit by construction lights, a promise of the future. His phone had been buzzing non-stop in his pocket. He pulled it out and looked at the screen. The notification bubble was a testament to Clara's spiraling panic. 63 missed calls from Clara. He felt nothing. No surge of victory, no desire for revenge. It was like looking at a financial report from a failed company he had once invested in. The loss had already been processed, the emotional capital written off long ago. This was just the final, official confirmation of its bankruptcy. He set the phone down on the marble countertop, the screen still glowing with her name. He turned away and walked towards the window, looking out at the future he had built. The buzzing finally stopped. Silence descended. It was the sound of his victory. The days that followed the announcement were a whirlwind of activity for Liam, and a slow-motion collapse for Richard and Clara. The Elysian Spire became the biggest story in the city. Magazine covers, architectural journals, and business publications all hailed it as a masterpiece. Tenants abandoned their preliminary agreements with the Vantage Tower in droves, flocking to get a spot in the Elysian. The momentum was unstoppable. For Richard Vance, the fallout was swift and brutal. His lenders, seeing their investment circling the drain, called in their loans. His stock price plummeted into oblivion. Vance Holdings, once a titan of industry, declared bankruptcy within a month. The half-finished Vantage Tower, Richard's monument to his own ego, stood as a sad steel skeleton against the sky, a symbol of his hubris. The banks seized it, and it would eventually be sold for pennies on the dollar to a rival developer. Clara's life unraveled with it. The lavish parties stopped. The fair-weather friends vanished. The credit cards were declined. The whispers followed her everywhere, at the grocery store, at the country club she could no longer afford. She was no longer Clara Vance, the powerful socialite. She was the ex-wife of a failure, and even more humiliatingly, the ex-wife of the man who had crushed him. Her parents, Marcus and Eleanor, were humiliated. Their connection to Richard, which they had once flaunted, was now a source of deep shame. Their social standing, so precious to them, was irrevocably tarnished. After 2 weeks of unanswered calls and texts, Clara, stripped of her pride and left with nothing but desperation, showed up unannounced at the offices of Phoenix Development. She had to bypass a formidable lobby security guard and talk her way past Sarah, who regarded her with undisguised contempt. But Clara was desperate enough to be convincing, and she finally found herself standing at the door to Liam's office. She pushed it open without knocking. Liam was standing at a large drafting table, sketching on a piece of parchment with a charcoal pencil. He didn't seem surprised to see her. He simply finished the line he was drawing before looking up, his eyes calm and devoid of any emotion she could recognize. "Clara," he said, his voice a simple statement of fact. "Liam," she began, her voice trembling slightly. She had rehearsed 100 different speeches on the way over, angry, apologetic, nostalgic, seductive. But seeing him here, in this space, so clearly in his element, so powerful and self-possessed, all her carefully constructed words failed her. "You destroyed him," she said, the words coming out as a weak accusation. "You destroyed us." Liam put down his pencil and wiped his hands on a cloth. He walked over to the window, gesturing for her to look out at the view of the spire. "I didn't destroy anyone, Clara. I built something. Richard destroyed himself. He over-leveraged, he took foolish risks, and he built a mediocre building based on arrogance, not vision. The market did the rest. You knew this would happen. You planned this. This was all revenge." He turned to face her, and for the first time she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not anger, but a deep, weary disappointment. "You think I spent 2 years of my life, poured every ounce of my being into creating something beautiful, just for revenge? You think that's small? No, Clara, this was never about you. Or Richard. This was about me. It was about proving to myself that the work matters, that integrity matters, that vision matters." He walked over to his desk and picked up a small framed photo. It was a picture of the two of them from early in their marriage, smiling, happy. "I looked at this from time to time," he said softly. "I tried to remember the woman who told me she loved me because I saw the world differently. The woman who believed in my quaint projects. I wondered where she went." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "I made a mistake, Liam. A terrible, terrible mistake." "Yes, you did," he agreed, his voice gentle but firm. "You made a choice. You chose status over substance. You chose wealth over worth. You stood by and watched your family and your new partner belittle me, and you never once stood up for me. You didn't just divorce me, Clara. You dismissed me. You wrote me off as a rounding error in your life's grand calculation." He was echoing her own thoughts, her own values back at her, and she flinched as if struck. This was the moral mirror, and the reflection it showed was ugly and distorted. "Please, Liam," she whispered, taking a step towards him. "Is there anything you can do? For Richard? For me?" He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw the spoiled, frightened child beneath the sophisticated veneer. He felt a pang of pity, but it was distant, like a memory of a pain long healed. "There is nothing to be done for Richard. He made his bed. As for you," he paused, "you have a choice, the same one I had 2 years ago. You can lie down and accept defeat, or you can get up and build something new, something of your own, something that has actual value." He placed the photograph face down on his desk. It was a quiet, final gesture. The past was now officially in the past. "Sarah will show you out," he said, turning back to his drafting table. the conversation was over. Clara stood there for a moment, enveloped in a silence that was heavier and more final than the one in the lawyer's office 2 years ago. She had come seeking a lifeline, a bailout, a miracle. She left with nothing but a hard truth and a choice. As she walked out of the gleaming offices of Phoenix Development and back into the harsh light of the city, she finally understood. Liam hadn't taken anything from her. He had simply held up a mirror, and she had been shattered by her own reflection. 6 months passed. The Elysian Spire was nearing completion, a shining testament to resilience and vision on the city's skyline. It was already fully leased, a resounding success that had shifted the city's center of gravity. Liam was no longer just an architect. He was a city builder, a visionary whose name was spoken with a mixture of awe and respect. He remained unchanged by the success, however. He still found his greatest joy not in boardrooms, but in the quiet moments at his drafting table, dreaming up the next project. He had sold the penthouse and bought a modest but beautiful home in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. It was a place of peace, filled with books and light, a world away from the cold opulence Clara had craved. He had reconnected with the few true friends who had stood by him, and was slowly, cautiously, opening himself up to the possibility of a new life, one built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was a simple, cream-colored envelope, and he recognized the elegant, looping handwriting immediately. It was from Clara. He almost threw it away, but curiosity, or perhaps a lingering need for closure, made him open it. The letter was short, and devoid of the drama or manipulation he might have expected. It was simple, humble, and honest. Liam, I don't expect you to read this, and I don't deserve a reply. I just needed to write it. For months I have been replaying our last conversation in my mind. You were right, about everything. I spent my whole life chasing a version of success that was defined for me by my parents, by my friends, by a world that values the wrong things. I thought wealth was strength and status was happiness. I was a fool. I had a man who possessed true strength, the strength of character, of integrity, of quiet, unwavering vision, and I threw him away because he didn't glitter. I have left Richard. I have left my parents' world. I moved into a small apartment, not unlike your old one, I imagine. I got a job working at a nonprofit arts foundation. It doesn't pay much, but for the first time in my life, I feel like I am doing something that has real value. I am building something of my own. I drive by the Elysian Spire sometimes. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. It's a monument to everything I failed to appreciate in you. I am so sorry, Liam, not for what I lost, but for the man I wasn't strong enough to stand beside. I hope, one day, you can find it in your heart to forgive me, not for my sake, but so that you can be completely free of the weight of my mistake. I wish you nothing but happiness. Sincerely, Clara. Liam read the letter twice. He felt a profound sense of release, a final closing of a chapter he hadn't realized was still slightly ajar. She had finally understood. Her apology wasn't a plea to get something back. It was an acknowledgement of what she had thrown away. It was genuine. He walked over to his fireplace, where a small fire was crackling, and he tossed the letter into the flames. He watched it curl, blacken, and turn to ash. It was not an act of anger, but of letting go. He had his answer. True victory wasn't in the downfall of his enemies. It wasn't in the 63 missed calls or the groveling apologies. It was in this moment. The quiet peace of his home, the satisfaction of work well done, the freedom of a future unburdened by the past. The real revenge, he realized, was not revenge at all. It was a life well lived. A life built on a foundation so strong that nothing and no one could ever tear it down again. The story of Liam Sterling became a quiet legend in the city, a moral fable for the modern age. It served as a potent reminder that true worth is not loud, it is not flashy, and it certainly cannot be measured by a bank statement. It is measured in resilience, in the quiet dignity with which one endures hardship, and in the unwavering commitment to a vision that others are too blind to see. It teaches us that the world may judge you by your temporary circumstances, but you must only ever judge yourself by the strength of your character. The greatest empires are not built of glass and steel, but of integrity and patience. And sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is the silent, steady work you do when the world has already written you off. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. What do you think was the biggest mistake Clara made? Was it underestimating Liam, or was it her own shallow definition of success? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of vindication and resilience. It truly means the world. Until next time, remember to build your life on a foundation that can't be shaken.